Yak Gadget, made in America, based outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Yak Gadget offers all kinds of storage accessories, quick mount motor mounts, anchor systems, track mounted accessories, even paddles. Go to yakgadget.com and get your kayak decked out for your next trip out on the water.
The 153 Bait Company, based in Troy, Ohio, make everything from plastics to custom painted hard baits. Hook 'em hard and hook 'em often. All of our baits are made to order and all of our hard baits are hand painted to order. So go to the153anglers.com to place your order today.
Based in Santa Ana, California, Bioenno Power provides the highest performance lithium ion phosphate batteries for the marine market. These batteries are 1/4 the weight of sealed lead acid batteries, provide over 2,000 to 3,000 charge cycles, and a 10+ year service life. These batteries can be used for any deep cycle application, including running fish finders, trolling motors, live wells, and LED lights. For more information, visit bioennopower.com. That's BIOENNOPOWER.com or contact dealers nationwide.
Welcome to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. This is the final cast segment with your hosts Brad Hicks and Josh Eldridge, where we cast our final opinions on all products good and bad. Welcome to the final cast. You're listening to the final cast on the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brad.
I'm Josh, aka Photon Blaster. This is the benefits of having a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
I love it. I was wondering what Photon Blaster meant, so now I know. Cool, man. That's awesome. Well, we got a awesome guest for you guys this episode. It's Michael Teach. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing fine. You could just call me Mike.
All right, sounds good. So let's start off the show by letting the listeners know who you are and what you do.
Well, I fish for smallmouth bass, basically. I'm also a writer. I write for the Boundary Waters Journal. I do volunteer work at the Bethany Center in Piqua. I help people eat, and basically, I'm just right now waiting for the river to go down so I can go fishing again.
Yeah, same here. I tried getting out last week, and then I saw the levels were just blown out. I was like, man, this stinks.
Yeah, man, I got the itch. I got the itch too. It's been I finally had a little bit of free time last weekend, and I was like, nope, it's not happening. But it is what it is, right?
Yep. Lakes got ice on them. Rivers are flooded. It's no good.
Ponds are open.
Oh, are they?
Well, the one I fished at today was.
Oh, okay. Nice. Did you catch anything today?
I caught a largemouth on the first cast, and then nothing else after that. Had one other one on. I couldn't tell what it was. It was so small. It probably was just holding onto the back of the lure, and I was using a Zulu or a Z-Man Chads, and it fell off at the halfway in, so I never even got to see it. Could have been a crappie. I'm not sure, but it was the first cast jinx.
Yeah.
You're like, this is either going to be great, spectacular, or awful, right?
Yeah, you just never know. And the pond had a lot of weeds in it too. All the grass carp are gone out of that pond, so they just built up really quick. That's the only reason I went there today, was because it was still early. Here in a few more weeks, so you can't even throw a lure in there without it being covered in green moss.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. Well, you mentioned the Zulu Rig, and I know Josh wanted to hit on this, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, basically, it's a Z-Man Shad's 5-inch scented soft plastic jerk bait. It's made out of elastic. They're also made they're sold by Strike King. They're called Z2s, but it's basically the same exact lure. They're all made by Z-Man. Really very durable plastic. I can catch up to 100 smallmouth on one lure, and you just don't hear that with soft plastics. And basically, once the nose and the back get worn down, I just put a little drop of super glue on there, and I can get another 40 or 50 fish out of it. But basically, I use a small Gamakatsu 1/0 offset worm hook on it. A lot of people think it's too small, but it runs flush with the lure the whole time. So it's practically invisible to the fish or to anybody with just the hook just riding onto its back. So it's weedless. And then I put on about 10 inches of line leader. I use a mono. I use 10-pound Trilene XL. And then I tie it off to a quality ball bearing swivel. Usually I use Spro swivels, but it's best to have a good ball bearing swivel on there because of the line twist, and also the swivel helps take the lure below subsurface, and so that it's not riding up there, and it also alleviates those nasty line twists.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically the rig right there.
Yeah, and it's similar to, it's like a single, what is it? I think it's called a donkey rig, where they use two flukes like that.
Yeah, they'll call it a double Zulu rig or a donkey rig, but
Okay.
I only use one. Sometimes it just gets a little too messy messing around with two lures, and I seem to do just fine with one.
Yeah, I meant to try that. So like there was 100 times last year that I'm like, I'm going to throw it. And then I ended up fishing lakes mainly. And I was like, I just kept kind of going off of what everybody said, but I've been dying to try this lure because I got some good smallmouth spots that produce. I know got some good fish in it. And I'm like, I'm really into throwing weedless presentations a lot of times. And I've been reading for 3 years about you and this setup. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've, been following you, Mike, and been laughing because of how many times somebody asked you about it. Like, I'm like, I'm not going to ask this poor guy how to do this rig. You've got so much information. You've given it to people. It's hilarious that you keep getting asked, because it's like, if you guys just follow Mike a little bit, he posts this link to how to build the rig at least like 50 times a year. So.
Yeah, I have pictures online. I just got tired of people, asking me to send them pictures or whatever. I finally put it on a thread on bwca.com. If you Google Zulu rigging and go to bwca.com, you will see a set of like 7-step pictures that you can click on one by one and enlarge the pictures and follow the look of it. And it's a very simple setup.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you added that swivel, because that's one of my biggest gripes, and throwing it, weightless like that on spinning gear, and all you end up doing is fighting line twists the whole time. So that's a great addition to a fairly simple rig, very weedless rig, a great presentation, especially for smallmouth fishing.
Well, they love hitting that thing on the top water. When the first time I used it was back in 2006, and I didn't have any swivels with me. I didn't even know what I had. I just pulled. I watched Kevin Van Dam slam some big smallmouth using this lure, and so I'm like, I threw a package of them. I had 4 Zulus with me in my bag, and I took them up to Quetico Provincial Park with me, and I decided one day, hey, I'm just going to give these things a shot and try to put one on a 1/0 worm hook and toss it out in the middle of this stream, and they just start slamming it right away. It was just crazy. So I was like, wow. So I stuck with it, but by the end of the trip, my line was just so twisted up and nasty. I'm like, I got to do something about this. I'm like, I'm going to have to try, using a swivel or something. And so that's where that all started.
And then what size of swivel are you using? Because I think I remember you pointing that out specifically, because you said that it helps create that subsurface, the presentation, as opposed to, because I know, especially if you're using like Zoom flukes, they like to ride right at the top a lot of times, and it takes a while to get them down. What size of swivel are you using to kind of get that subsurface effect?
Well, it depends on how far you want it to go, but I've been pretty partial to the size 4 recently. It takes it down sometimes, 1.5 to 2 feet. It's a slow sinking lure, and just a little twitch, and it just sort of just pauses it level, and fish eat that thing up. It's just incredible. I've never used a bait like that for smallmouth before until 2006, and I wish I would have known about this presentation, 20 or 30 years ago. Would have saved me a lot more time and searching for the ultimate lure. So far, it's the best thing I've ever thrown for smallmouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always hear everybody throwing flukes and stuff like that, never on a Zulu rig. But I've heard like a bunch of different like unique presentations of the fluke, and I'm like, man, I need to try that. Throw it behind like some big rock or something like that, somewhere that has like calm water.
Yeah.
Well, Gussie on the Bassmasters this last weekend won with a 4-inch Z-Man shads, and he was the only one catching smallmouth. And he won the whole tournament just catching smallmouth, and he was using it more or less with a lead-headed jig and just dropping it vertically straight down and just sort of slow trolling it and just sort of like ice fishing it really slow in some deep holes. And that's how he won the tournament this last weekend.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Better take note, Brad, for Dale Hollow.
Oh, I know, man. I've actually never thrown a fluke or any. Well, I take that back. I've thrown the caffeine shad, and I caught a fish on that, but I've never been consistent with it.
One of my best days at Kaiser Lake was actually on the caffeine shad, the KVD ones.
Mm-hmm.
We caught like 50 or 60 largemouth right off that where the campsites are on the water right there, and it's got that little dirt peninsula where the creek flows in. Yep. We were straight out from there, dude, and we tore it up, man. Like right in the evening time, just throwing caffeine shad. Like I walked out like maybe 10 yards out in the water, and we just lit it up, man. I mean, we went through probably like 20 or 30 of them in a matter of like 3 or 4 hours.
Well, see, that's the thing. I could just use one of those Zulus. That's why I hate when people say they use flukes, and I'm like, why would you use a Zoom fluke if you could use a Z-Man shads where you could catch 100 instead of 10?
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, and even and they're a little bit more pricey, but when in the long run, you're a pack of them is lasting for a season, as opposed to, like I said, using a caffeine shad and going through like 20, 30, 40 baits like in no time. Like, every time one of those. Now, mind you, we were getting a lot of tear-throughs on the nose, Mike, like you were saying. A little bit of super glue could have probably fixed that. But still, I mean, the durability of Z-Man, their products is just unmatched right now, and so.
And they get better as they get used. I mean, the more they get used, the more the better they look and act in the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the same goes with the TRD Ned rig and everything. Just the softer they get after getting bit so many times, they just sway back and forth real nice.
Yeah.
But I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, Mike, I wanted to you've got a handle, and I think is it maybe your Instagram. It's Quetico Mike. You want to explain where you can get that name from?
Well, I get the Quetico part from the provincial park I go to up in Canada. It's right above Minnesota. If you go up towards it's like halfway in between International Falls and Thunder Bay on the Canada side, and Mike is obviously my first name.
That Quetico area, Boundary Waters and all that stuff, is that probably your favorite area to fish for smallmouth anywhere?
Oh yeah, it's God's country up there. It's the most beautiful place in the world. Well, pretty much. I mean, to me it is, but I mean, the only place I've ever seen that even looks better is Glacier National Park in Montana. But as far as the smallmouth fishing, it's just unreal up there.
It's a bucket list spot for me. I'd love to get up there someday.
What's the biggest smallmouth you pulled from up there?
23 inches.
Nice.
Wow.
Did you get to weigh it?
No, I didn't have a scale. I just, quick measurement, picture, back in the water it went. And it was. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, you're right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we were fishing some gravelly. I guess it's some spawning areas, but they weren't coming in to spawn just yet. The females were out there cruising around the outer edges, probably 8 or 10 feet, and we were sitting practically right on the bank in the canoe, and I hooked into this thing, and it pulled the canoe out probably about 10 or 15 yards just right off. I mean, there's two guys in a canoe and pulled us right off the shoreline.
That's crazy.
See, that's the thing I love about kayaks and canoes and stuff, man. You get taken for a ride when you hook into a big fish. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's probably easier to land a fish that way or tire it out more than being stationary somewhere.
Yeah. Speaking of boundary waters, how easy is it to carry a kayak out there if somebody were to go?
Not easy. That's why it's called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, not the Boundary Waters Kayak Area. But
gotcha.
I've seen some kayaks around the edges of the boundary waters, but if you went deep on in, I mean, you have to carry those things for miles, and you have to have all your supplies you got to carry with yourself, too. And so I've never kayaked up there. I don't see a whole lot of people kayaking up there, but you do see some around the edges. But to get deep into the woods, it's easier just to go with another person. Well, actually, you can take a solo canoe too. I've seen several solo canoes out there, but the best mode of transportation is definitely a two-man, tandem canoe. I mean, when you have two backpacks, a food pack, all your fishing gear, whatever, it's nice to have all that room to be able to carry all that stuff with you when you travel 30 or 40 miles.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't realize it was that far through the woods.
Yeah, well, man, you ain't taking a fully rigged Hobie out there.
Oh, I knew that. I was just saying, maybe like a 50-pound, 60-pound kayak or something,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now you could get to some of the bigger lakes along the border, and just you could kayak all through there and not have to carry the kayak more than a few times, and you might be into doing well there. But if you want to get deep into the woods, it's probably best that you take a canoe. I mean, like our standard trip up into Quetico, we would try to do like 25 some miles the first day and get most of that out of the way, and then do another 10 miles the next day, and then set up camp and stay there on some remote lake all to yourself for like a week.
Yeah.
And then work your way back down later. I mean, we have a little lake up there we like to hit up, and we catch a ton of, the 2.5 to 3.5 pound smallmouth. And I mean, you catch so many, you have to put something over your thumb because your thumbs are bleeding from, lipping so many smallmouth. And then you work your way back down to some of the bigger lakes along the border, and that's where you're going to find your trophy fish. You're not going to catch as many fish, but you can catch a trophy fish. I mean, I've caught my 4 biggest fish out of one lake up there, and it's a border lake. It's on the Canadian side, but a 45-inch northern, a 23-inch smallmouth, a 32-inch walleye, all came out of the same bay.
That's awesome.
So, have you been itching to get back because of the whole COVID thing and the border being shut down?
I can't go into details of how bad it hurts not to be able to go this last year and then this year. It's pretty much it's not going to happen this year either. I doubt. I mean, to enter into Canada, I had to get a remote area border crossing permit so I could get into Quetico Provincial Park. And they called me up this year because last year I already paid for my remote area border crossing permit that I could not use. It's basically going through the woods without having to go through customs.
Right.
So you fill out the paperwork, and then each year they send you a permit that you could pass through the woods in between International Falls and Thunder Bay, and you could cross anywhere out in the woods that way if you had this piece of paper with you. But they revoked them for this year. They just said they would just send me my refund from last year, and that chances are, well, they pretty much said it wasn't going to happen this year. So I don't know. I'm hoping that it'll end up opening up next year. I'm sure they're probably going to want everybody to have vaccinations to get across the border now too. So you'll probably need vaccination paperwork along with some type of remote area border crossing permit, and then your camping permit, and then your fishing license, and then you also have to have an outdoor card now to get your fishing license. So I mean, there is some paperwork that you have to go through, but once you get used to going through all that, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That never even crossed my mind.
On the boundary water side, I mean, that's where I'm going to go up and spend a couple weeks up there this year, at least a couple weeks. I mean, the first trip's going to be 2 weeks. I'm going to probably do another trip for at least another week by myself. I usually go on a solo trip out in the woods by myself each year for 7 or 8 days. But the permits for there are pretty easy to come by. I mean, a lot of the good entry points go quickly at the beginning of the year, but the area that I go to has like 14 entries, 14 groups a day that can go through there. So there's usually an extra permit available for me when I need one, as long as I don't have to, go in on a Friday or Saturday.
Yeah,
and it's a lot cheaper on the American side. It's only like $26 to camp for as long as you want.
Wow.
On the and on the Canadian side, it's like $22 a day or night or whatever, however you want to put it. So yeah, there's a little difference, and that's probably why there's less people over there, and maybe that's why the fishing's a tad better too.
Yeah, they probably got better regulations than we do here also.
Yeah, there's no live bait allowed in Quetico, and no barbs on your hooks allowed there either.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Does that make it a little bit harder to hook into fish?
Without the barbs?
Yeah, or at least keep them pinned.
Yeah, it makes it a little more challenging, that's for sure. You've seen a smallmouth come flying out of the water before.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love it. So when I think of smallmouth fishing, I think of deep lakes. What are these lakes up there deep? What kind of what's the habitat?
Oh yeah, there's one lake that we travel up like I do on my first day. It's say it's like 14 or 15 miles long, and it's probably about 400 feet deep at its deepest point. The water's very cold there in May.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I've actually seen like snow and ice on what would that be heading north on the east side of the lake. As I'm traveling up the lake, there's still be like frozen waterfalls and snow piled up along the edges over there. And if you needed a cold drink, all you do is just dip your cup over the side of the canoe and drink.
The water's that clean?
Yeah, that clean and that cold. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's some of the cleanest lakes in North America, that's for sure.
I believe it. There's nobody around to pollute it.
No.
It's not like the Great Miami.
I don't think I'd ever drink out of the Great Miami unless I had a really good filter.
Me either.
That's disgusting. Now, Mike, for anybody who's interested in taking a trip like this, what are some of the most important things that you think that somebody needs to make sure that they're packing for a trip like this?
For a trip to Quetico?
Yeah, or the Boundary Waters, where you're going to spend some time out in the wilderness like that.
What all is involved with the gear wise?
Yeah. What do you think's like some of the most important things that people need to consider outside their fishing stuff?
A tent, a good quality tent, and rain gear is worth $1 million out there. Mm-hmm. You have to have quality rain gear. I've seen too many people go through cheap rain gear and just be miserable. I've been miserable out there before, where I'd spend $1 million for a good rain suit at certain times when you're just getting poured on. Yeah. As soon as I got back from one trip after about freezing to death and getting rained on, I opened up the Cabela's catalog and picked out the most expensive rain suit there was in there and bought it. It was worth the price of gold. And it was a quality rain suit that I used for like 15 years. And I just finally got a new one. But yeah, a rain suit's key. You're looking at getting some type of stove, propane stoves. I mean, you can cook on fires up there if there's not a fire ban, but it's easier and cleaner to cook on a little propane stove. Mm-hmm. You're looking at like water filters, like I mentioned earlier. You'd want a water filter because a lot of times you'll be getting water from the edges of the shoreline, and unless you're going out in the middle of the lakes and scooping up water, if you need to get water close to shore or whatever. I mean, there are beaver around, and you get Giardia, the disease from beaver fever, whatever you want to call it. and you don't want to get any of that. So you want to kill off all of that, all this nasty bacteria and whatever else is floating around in the water there along the edges. But let's see, tent, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, waterproof stuff bag for your clothes, and waterproof stuff bag for your sleeping bag. You want everything to be waterproof, and then a good quality food pack. I got an insulated food pack, and it's got a zipper on the top. It's best to have a zipper on top of there because you never know what kind of animals like to get into your food. I've lost too many trail mix and snacks where little chipmunks or squirrels or whatever. It's not the big bears that get you, it's the little bears that get inside your food pack, or mice or whatever.
Yeah.
So now everything is in Tupperware, inside baggies, inside Tupperware, and then the Tupperware is inside the food pack. So there's a whole list of things, and I mean, you can find the stuff online of what's required or what you should take along. But that's some of the things.
Heck yeah.
You ever have any encounters with a bear or anything while you're out there?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I had one walk right through my camp while I was up there by myself. I was underneath the tarp, and I was just finishing eating lunch, and I was walking towards the lake with my pail, or my whatever you want to call it, from what I was just eating out of. And I walked past my tent, and I look over the side, and I can see the back end of a bear just right behind my tent. He just, because the back of my tent is so close to the lake where they could just crawl up. He just came right up out of the lake and walked right up in the camp, and he was sitting right behind my tent. And I was like, oh, no, I knew what that was. And so I started to head back towards my tarp because I had my food pack under there. And by the time I got around to the other side of the tent, I could see him staring at me, and he's probably about 15 feet away. I picked up the food pack and walked briskly towards the canoe because I figured if anything was going to happen, I was going to whip that food pack into the canoe and take off paddling and get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
But so I got the food pack down to the canoe and got it in there, and then I went back up, grabbed my paddle, and went back into camp to see what that bear was doing. And he was underneath my tarp right where I was just eating, 5 minutes ago. And he was just had his nose up into the top of the tarp, just sniffing away, just smelling whatever I was cooking. And, I started yelling at him, like I was yelling at a dog, I was yelling at him to get, and waving my paddle around like I was going to take him on with my paddle. And he really didn't care about me. He didn't, he just moseyed around, and then finally he just took off down the trail back behind the back of the side of the camp, back towards on the American side, they have a fiberglass toilet back there. On the Canadian side, you have to dig your own little holes when you got to go. But that's the one good thing about the American campsites. They always have a fiberglass crapper back behind camp, which is kind of convenient. And so anyways, he went down the crapper trail.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, and the bad thing was about 10 minutes after that, I had to use the facilities, and I had to figure, was I going to paddle to another campsite somewhere or go back there and take care of my business? And I ended up walking back there. Yeah, pretty much.
That's
one of my bear stories. I've had several encounters.
That's funny. You had to dig your own hole on the United States side.
No, you dig your holes. I
buried my underwear
side.
too.
Yeah.
What was that?
I buried my underwear. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I was just going to say that you have to dig holes on the Canadian side, and the American side they have the fiberglass crappers. So that's. But on the Canadian side, you can camp wherever you want. But I mean, there's mostly established campsites around, but there's no fire grate or anything. The American side has a fire grate, and they have the crapper, and that's the difference. And they're established campsites where you can only camp there. You can't just camp wherever you want. But over on the Canadian side, if you need to camp somewhere and you can put a tent down, you can camp there.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I think I want to get into this next segment because this is what I kind of found out who you were through your writing, and I don't remember who published it for you or not, but you wrote a story about your experience up at the Boundary Waters during 9/11, and while I read this story, I just got chills. I thought it was one of the coolest stories I ever read. So let's go into that a little bit. Let's just share the story, if you will.
Well, this story will be published this year in the fall edition of the Boundary Waters Journal, the magazine I write for. It's the 20th year anniversary of 9/11, and basically it's the story about my first solo trip up into Canada. I was supposed to go with somebody else, and they backed out on me the night before I was leaving. So I had like 14 hours before I was leaving, and the guy backs out on me. And, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And the guy says, well, you should just cancel. You've been up there enough times. You don't need to go again. And I'm like, he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand how much I love going to Quetico. So I just ended up just packing everything up and taking my canoe up there. And I just went on the trip by myself. And so I went up there. I think I went in on 9/9 of 01 and went out there and basically set up camp by myself, and I probably went about 7 or 8 miles deep into the woods and ended up staying there the whole time because the fishing was fantastic. But, I was killing the smallmouth just on the other side of this island I was staying at on topwater, throwing big Lucky 13s. They're like a big popper chugger bait and a bullfrog color, and they were just slamming that off the surface. I also caught the biggest pike in my life during that trip. I caught a 43-inch northern pike. On the point. The only problem was that I ran out of film taking pictures of smallmouth, and this was back in the day when you had disposable cameras. There's no digitals. Taking pictures with your phone or whatever. This was just a plastic camera, and I ran out of film, and I ended up catching this 43-inch pike, and there I am standing there with this 43-inch pike. Nobody around to see it. No camera to take a picture of it, and it's. I mean. It was great catching it, but all I can do is just tell stories. I don't have any pictures or anything of it now. But anyways, go ahead.
We believe you. No, I've seen your pictures. I believe it.
All right. So I'm out there, and I stay on that island for like 5 days, and then I move further back closer to the border, and like on the, it must have been 9/12, I ran into some people. Actually, 9/11 was the day I caught that 43-inch pike. And there's no news feed out there, and I'm not seeing anybody. I've talked to a couple of people, and they probably had no idea that 9/11 happened either. But the second to last day, it was like on 9/14, I ran across some people who were coming into the park as I was working my way back towards the border, and it must have been their first trip in because they were all giddy about being able to carry all their stuff across the first trail. And they never once mentioned anything about 9/11. So I still didn't know anything about it. And I was paddling in on the last morning, and it was a really hazy, foggy morning, barely see when I got to the border. And one side's Canada, one side's America, and both the flags are flying at half mast. And I'm like, wow, somebody important must have really, must have died, to have both sides of the border flying their flags at half mast. And so I carry my stuff up the trail to the American side of the border, and I'm waiting on a towboat from the outfitter to come pick me up and tow me back about 15 miles back to the outfitters, so I can get my car, take a shower, whatever, and go home. And while I'm standing there, there's some kid from Wisconsin there, and his father just went down to the ranger station to get his permits, and he starts talking to me about fishing, we're asking me questions about fishing. And then he just sort of stops me in the middle of the sentence, and he goes, you don't know what's going on in the world, do you? And I'm like, no, what's going on? And he goes, there's a plane that flew into the World Trade Center. And I'm like, wow. I said, did anybody get hurt? And he goes, he just looks at me, he goes, you don't understand. He goes, the whole Trade Center is gone. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, and another plane flew into the other World Trade Center, and it's gone now too. I'm like, oh God, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what are you, and then he goes, another one hit the Pentagon. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, and then he goes, yeah, and one more was headed towards the White House, but it crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell happened to this world? And I had no idea what was going on. You know, this is 9/15. This happened 4 days ago, and had no idea that 9/11 happened. And I used to tell people when we were out there in the woods, I go, World War III could start up, and we'd have no idea why we're out here. I have no idea. Right. And so I didn't find out about 9/11 until 9/15 from some kid from Wisconsin who was standing on the border with me talking about fishing. And then I got back to the outfitters, and there's a couple guys from Cincinnati there, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to get back because they flew up there, and all the planes were not flying. You know, they're all canceled. I offered to give them both a ride back to Ohio. I'm like, complete strangers, but they're complete strangers to me too. And I'm like, yeah, throw your stuff in my truck. Let's go. And then they declined. They said, no, we're just going to end up renting a car, I guess. And then they were going to travel home. I'm like, all right, whatever. I was just willing to help out, give you 1,000-mile lift home. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the story in a nutshell. But if you want to read the full story, get a copy of the Boundary Waters Journal, fall edition. I also have another article coming out in about 3 weeks. I did an article on wakebait fishing up there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I started.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I just started using wakebaits. I took one up there with me on my last trip. I never used a wakebait before, but the only time I ever seen anybody ever use a wakebait was on TV. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I bought the wakebait was because it had a bigger profile, and I thought I could use it as a crankbait in the river. Hold on just a second. I got low power mode on my telephone right now, so I'm down to 20% on the phone.
Okay. Yeah, we're probably not going to be much longer.
Back to the story about the wakebait. Okay, so I order a wakebait to fish in the river because I figured I could use it as a crankbait. Because if you crank a wakebait hard enough, it'll go down about 18 inches or so. So I'm like, because I've been using these shallow running KVD 1.5s, which are nice, but they're not huge. And so I'm just looking for a bigger profile bait, one that would work in the river. I mean, I'm not fishing more than 2 or 3 feet of the river at a time anyway. So I started thinking, this wakebait might be a great crankbait for me. So I buy that and I buy a bunch of lures for going up to Quetico and whatnot. And I'm putting all the baits into my tackle box. And I looked over at that wakebait and I said, well, I thought to myself, why wait to get back and try that in the river? Why not just throw it? I had room in my tackle box, throw it in the tackle box and, maybe give it a try and see what the wakebait is all about. And so I took it on up there and we started doing some topwater fishing by some waterfalls. And we were catching some fish, but we weren't getting, as much action as I would have liked. And so I figured, what the heck, I'd give this wakebait a try. And big smallmouth just started slamming it. And 4 out of 5 of the biggest smallmouth that I caught on the last trip, I caught one on a Zulu Rig, was in the top 5, but the top 3 were definitely all on the wakebait. And it was addictive just watching that thing, just tantalizingly slow. Reel that thing as slow as you possibly could. And it would just wiggle and make a big wake. And you could and it's so quiet up there, you could hear the rattle from, 25 yards away. You could hear it, and it sounded like a locomotive, little chuck, 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 chugging along. And then all of a sudden, just explosion, just huge smallmouths. So I was like, well, I should write an article about that when I get home. I mean, people should, it's like one of the most overlooked topwater that because I've been overlooking it for 30 years or whatever, and I've never seen anybody throw it. So, I mean, it worked fantastic. So I'm like, when I brought it back, I came back in September and started fishing the river with it. I started slamming some big smallmouth out of the river with that thing. And I didn't have to use it as a crankbait. They were coming up and just slamming the hell out of it like they were up in Canada. It was awesome.
Yeah, you're a local guy like us. Me and Josh is from Dayton, by the way. There's a local guy that makes wake baits. He hand carves them. Witty Outdoors. I don't know if you've heard of them, but he makes it. They're really nice. They're expensive, but they're really nice. And I want to throw one of those this year.
Yeah, I know who he is. I've seen some of his videos before.
Yeah.
Have you tried a spy bait yet up there?
No, I have not.
You should give it a whirl, man.
Before. Or do they have like propellers on the front and the back?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of looks like a little bit of a thinner profile jerk bait, like a hard jerk bait, and it's got a propeller on the front and back. And it's kind of it's I don't want to say it's new. It's not new, but it's kind of gaining a little bit more popularity lately. And I know that there's a lot of guys that have done real well doing spy baits up at St. Clair and some of those areas that, you can, if you're kind of having trouble getting to kind of commit, the fish, from what I understand, they're not traveling real far like they, to come strike it, like maybe like a crankbait or something. But it's, from what I understand, it's a pretty good bait. Maybe give that a shot up there and see how you do.
It's like a devil's horse, right? Have you ever used a devil's horse? It's maybe you guys aren't old enough. But that's a lure that has two prop baits on it, and it sounds a lot like the spy bait. It's just it was called a devil's horse.
Yeah.
So Google it sometime. But
definitely,
they also made one with a spook, because they're a spook and a bullfrog, where they were putting propellers on the front and back. I can't remember what they were calling it, but I ended up taking the propeller off the front and just using it like a big, just a single prop bait, and started using it that way, because the Magnum torpedo up there, I've killed on them, and it's basically now everybody's using the Whopper ploppers now, but before that it was always the torpedo, and for whatever reason I still do pretty good throwing the torpedoes, the bullfrog torpedoes up there, and in the river at times.
Yeah, I remember using that over at Cedars Creek on the tailwaters, and had one of my funnest days topwater fishing down there using the torpedo.
I'm gonna pull the devil's horse up real quick just for people who are watching. So here it is, right here.
Nice.
Yeah, I've seen those before.
Does it have two blades on it, propellers or whatever props?
Yep.
Yeah, it's basically a spy bait. That's probably where spy bait originated from.
Yeah, I mean that thing's been around before I was born, probably. So I mean, it's probably been around for 50 years. So, but yeah, now they just renamed it.
Yeah.
Basically, like a Whopper plopper. All it basically is a torpedo, except it's not a metal blade on the back.
Right. Yeah.
Not a whole lot different.
Marketing hype. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, all that Whopper plopper stuff came from muskie fishermen. That guy was making those to fish for muskie, and they found out that these big 5 and 6 pound smallmouth were hitting these muskie baits. And I think the only reason they sell them smaller is because they don't want to intimidate smallmouth fishermen, thinking, "Oh my God, that's way too big to be thrown." But I mean, that's how you catch a monster. You throw a monster bait.
Right. Yeah. I know guys that are throwing the the 130 plopper on the river, and they catch fish with it.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm one of those guys. I don't really throw the bigger one. I throw the 90 or the 110, I think. But I need to throw the bigger one.
I started throwing. I took up the 7-inch Streak Z, which is basically a 7-inch Z-Man shads, but it's just 2 inches longer, and it looks a lot bigger. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to catch monsters with this thing. First fish I catch is probably about a 14-inch smallmouth. I'm throwing a 7-inch, soft plastic jerk bait, and I'm thinking I'm going to catch a 6-pound smallmouth, and the first fish it hits is 14 inches. So, I mean, I guess if you throw out a 10-inch one, maybe you get a 20-inch smallmouth. Who knows?
That's what I got to do. I haven't broke that 20-inch mark yet. Cool. I think we're gonna wind this down, man. I don't want his battery to die on us. So
yeah,
I got 12%. So I mean, you probably got a good 5 minutes if you want to go for it.
We'll not risk it, but
right.
Yeah. You got anything else, Josh?
Nope. Mike, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us tonight, man. I look forward to following you, further into this, man, it's fun seeing your pictures that you bring back from the Boundary Waters, and I wish you success up there this year, man. And sorry, I can't get over to Canada yet, but hopefully that'll lift soon.
I can see Canada from where we're at. I just can't go over there.
Yeah. Do you want to let people know where they can follow you or where they can find your writing and stuff?
Well, to find my writing, check out the Boundary Waters Journal. You can find them online at boundarywatersjournal.com. And like I said, I'll have an article about wakebait fishing in the spring, and in the fall you can read about my 9/11 or adventure. So, and if you want to find me on Instagram, I'm at Quetico Mike. It's QUETICOMIKE. If you want to see images of some of the bigger smallmouth that I catch up there or in the Great Miami River, go to Quetico Mike and follow me. And I guess if you just want to Google Quetico Mike, you can find images in that manner if you wanted to as well.
Awesome. Yeah, highly suggest you guys go follow Mike on Instagram. One of my favorite accounts to follow, man. I'm a big fan. It's awesome. So we'll end that there, man. Thanks again for coming on, listeners. We'll see you guys next week, and you guys have a good one.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode on Paddle and Fin. Don't forget to go check out our website at paddle_and fin.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at Paddle and Fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest on a future episode, feel free to email us at paddle_and fin@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paddle and Fin on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our show supporters, Angler. The Angler button and app just makes for a better time on the water and creates a virtual logbook for every fishing outing out on the water. Shout out to Rocktown Adventures, located in Northern Illinois, for all your kayaking, camping, and hiking needs. Shout out to Jigmasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to jigmasters.com